On Bonnie Jacobs' notes, and these are the notes, right? Do you recognize these?
I do, and we
Okay.
received more sort of at the tail end just a couple months ago.
All right, so the first of Bonnie Jacobs' notes is on 10/17/2011. Do you recall that?
I don't recall the exact date. I don't have anything in front of me.
And she was already, Amber Heard was already in the relationship with Johnny Depp at this point, was she not?
I believe she was, yes.
Okay. And in Bonnie Jacobs' notes, she documents,
However, oh, go ahead.
she documents multiple occasions that Amber Heard reports to her physical violence upon her by Mr. Depp, does she not?
There are several notes that indicate that Ms. Heard has reported violence by Mr. Depp, yes.
Many, correct?
I wouldn't qualify it as many. I'm not sure what you mean by many.
How many would you say?
I don't know. I don't have the notes in front of me.
Okay, well, what do you recall in deciding to make your opinions in this case?
Well, I'm confused about the dates because I know that Dr. Jacobs treated Ms. Heard even while she was in her prior relationship, leaving her prior relationship with her last wife.
Dr. Curry, I'm not going to ask you to try to bring in extraneous things. I'm asking you what you recall of these
But
notes.
the dates would have been different based on that alone.
Okay.
And I recall that there was quite a bit of information because these were copious notes spanning back in time from her relationship with Tasha.
So Dr. Curry, please answer my question. How many occasions do you recall
I don't know.
Dr. Jacobs documenting Amber reporting physical abuse?
I don't know.
Now, you also said that you listened to audio tapes in this case, correct?
Yes.
Did you hear Mr. Depp admitting to headbutting Ms. Heard?
That is not what I heard.
You didn't hear that?
I heard a conversation about headbutting. I did not hear him, as you said, admit to headbutting Ms. Heard.
Okay, that's your characterization of it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see the videotape of Mr. Depp in the kitchen?
Yes.
Okay, did Ms. Heard imagine that or create that, or was she responsible for that somehow?
Objection, I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay. What, if any, impact did that have on your opinions watching Mr. Depp in that video?
I'm not sure it was one of many pieces of the exhibits and other collateral data that I considered. I'm not sure what the direct impact was or if that could be measured.
All right. Now, counsel asked you whether you had conducted any type of examination on Mr. Depp, and I believe your answer was no, correct?
No.
You did not review any medical records or psychological records from Mr. Depp either, did you?
I reviewed all of the records that were available.
Do you recall reviewing medical and psychological records on Mr. Depp?
Yes.
Do you recall Dr. Blaustein referring to Mr. Depp having rage?
No, I actually recall him referring to Ms. Heard in that note.
Your testimony is that Dr. Blaustein was referring to Amber Heard as having rage?
I transcribed several of the notes, and I may be missing a time when I said that about Mr. Depp. The handwriting was very difficult to transcribe, but there was one instance in which I recall transcribing him stating that Mr. Depp reported that Ms. Heard had rage.
Dr. Blaustein's deposition was taken, was it not?
I don't recall.
Do you recall, so I take it then you don't recall him testifying that Mr. Depp told him he had rage and demons?
I don't recall.
Do you recall Dr. Blaustein testifying that Mr. Depp looked at his wife, Amber, like his mother or his sister that he didn't like?
I haven't seen his deposition. I don't recall that.
Okay. Now, did you see and do you know whether Mr. Depp has ever been diagnosed with any personality disorders?
That's not relevant to my task to conduct an evaluation of Ms. Heard. So I do not know that he has had one. It was not in the records that he did.
All right. So one way or the other, you don't know whether Mr. Depp suffers from any personality disorders.
That's not my task.
Okay. Let me go to IPV perpetrators. Would you agree that accusations of infidelity can be considered one of the characteristics of a personality perpetrator of IPV?
It can be a characteristic of a lot of things. It is something that can be weaponized if somebody is trying to or is having rage toward their partner.
Let's go to page 270. Line 3, my question was, are accusations of infidelity considered one of the characteristics of a perpetrator, a personality perpetrator of IPV?
The objection.
The question is vague and ultimately ambiguous.
I don't understand the objection.
I'll overrule the objection.
Okay. And your answer under oath
Can
at
you
that time?
remind me of the page? I thought you
Page
would-
270, line 3 was where my question was.
Okay.
And your answer is at line 8. You said it can be, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And interrogating your partner about unfounded accusations of infidelity can be abusive. Would you agree?
it can be if they're unfounded, yes.
Okay. And psychological consequences for a victim of IPV can include diminished self-esteem, correct?
Yes,
Depressed mood,
yes,
anxiety,
yes,
fearfulness,
certainly.
diminished self-agency,
Yes,
feeling powerless,
yes,
loss of sleep.
yes,
And IPV is a traumatic stressor, would you agree?
it is.
All right, and IPV is capable of resulting in PTSD, is it not?
It is.
Okay, and IPV is capable of resulting in other trauma-based disorders, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Now, Amber's medical examination, she was cooperative, correct?
her psychological, yes, she was cooperative and polite.
Okay. And in the 2 full days of examination, you felt she was polite and answered all your questions, except in one instance where she furrowed her brow when you were asking about friendships in high school, correct?
That's not correct.
All right, let's go to page 275. So we start on 274 with the, was she polite? You said yes. Was she cooperative? Yes. Did she answer your questions? For the most part, yes. This is, now we're on page 275, lines 4 and 5. And then my question was, did she at any time become combative or unfriendly with you or angry? And your answer was, there was one instance in which she appeared annoyed and the posturing forward a bit, more assertive tone, furrowed brow, when I was questioning something, following up on data that had been inconsistent about friendships in high school. Other than that, she was very polite. Is that your answer at that time?
That was my answer at that time, and it's inconsistent with the question you had just asked me.
And would you agree that appearing for this examination with an expert who had been retained by Mr. Depp more than a year earlier might be a little stressful?
Yes,
Okay. And in fact, not only had you been retained by Mr. Depp, but what had been communicated by Mr. Depp's team was that you had called Amber Heard a liar and a perpetrator of abuse, correct?
first of all, I'd like to clarify that I was not retained by Mr. Depp. I was retained by Mr. Depp's counsel. And what I can say that, yes, any examinee in a forensic context, you would consider that they're probably stressed.
All right, would you agree that all perpetrators of IPV have anger management issues?
Yes,
And a large portion of IPV perpetrators have substance abuse issues.
it's one of many factors that correlates with intimate partner violence, but there are certainly many people who perpetuate intimate partner violence who do not have substance abuse issues.
All right, let's go to 131, line 17.
$131, you said?
Yes, line 12 is what I have here. And I'm talking about, you said, and just to give context, remember I was asking you what percentage of people you treat that are perpetrators, and you'd said 5%. Do you recall that, just for substance?
I see that here.
Okay, and then I said, of the 5% that are IPV perpetrators that you've treated over the last 8 years, how many of these perpetrators have substance abuse issues? And your answer was?
I see that I answered with a figure of speech, a large portion.
Okay, thank you. And it's common for the perpetrator to essentially gaslight the victim, accuse them of being the perpetrator. Would you agree?
Are you in a different area, or are you asking me a separate question?
I'm asking you a question.
Oh.
And it's common.
Sorry, can you please repeat it?
Yes. And it's common for the perpetrator to essentially gaslight the victim, accuse them of being the perpetrator. Would you agree? That's exactly how it was asked in the deposition. So I'm trying
I
to be
understand. It is a compound question. I'll
Okay.
sustain the objection.
And it's common for the perpetrator to essentially gaslight. I don't think that's, Your Honor, I think it's just one question. Let me try it. To gaslight the victim, isn't it?
That's a characteristic of psychological abuse, yes.
Okay, and it's common then for them to accuse them of being the perpetrator, the victim.
That's a characteristic of abuse from women perpetrated against men. It's actually very, very common. About 90% of male victims of IPV have reported that a female partner who abuses them makes threats to report their partner as an abuser. It's less common for men to make that statement to female partners just because there's less potential consequence.
Isn't it true, though, that some form of gaslighting is often present in these personality-based IPV scenarios?
Yes,
Okay. And it's distressing for the victim to be accused, is it not?
absolutely,
It causes them a lot of fear,
certainly,
and it causes them a lot of distress,
absolutely, yes,
and in fact, they feel falsely accused, correct?
yes,
And they feel paranoid,
yes,
and they feel frightened,
yes,
afraid that everyone's going to believe the perpetrator, correct?
yes,
And in fact, they're afraid they're going to lose their security, correct?
Can you clarify what you mean by security?
Well, that's the next one. And they're afraid they're going to lose their reputation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the testing for a moment. You talked about the MMPI-2, but that's not the most recent MMPI, is it?
No, it's the most researched.
Okay. Now, you need to have an elevated, on the MMPI, there was only one section that had elevated scores, correct?
No, that's not correct.
It was the K section, correct?
That's not correct.
Okay. And was there any elevated score over 65 on the MMPI?
I would need to take a look at it. If, you know, I provided a 25-page interpretation outline. If you're able to pull that up, I'd be happy to go over any of the individual scores for you.
Can you recall any clinical scales for the MMPI-2 for Amber Heard that were above 65 as you sit there today?
Again, there are multiple scales on this test, 25 pages worth listed. So if you can pull it up, then I can review and give you a confident answer.
What can you recall as you sit there?
I'm hesitant to do that because I don't want to make an error by ignoring hundreds of scale scores.
And would you agree that you can't make a pathological determination or diagnosis if the scales are not elevated on the MMPI-2?
I would not agree with that.
Okay. Now, one of the answers that Amber gave is that it's hard for her to feel safe, correct?
Are you talking about the MMPI too?
Yes.
Again, I don't recall. There are 567 items on that. I would need to see her results.
Well, it's a common trauma symptom, isn't it, to not feel safe?
Sure?
And safety concerns are common among women who have been victimized, correct?
Women and men, yes.
Okay, and common especially for sexually victimized people. Would you agree?
Any type of victimization, yes.
Okay, and hard to trust. That's a common after effect of interpersonal violence-related trauma, correct?
Sure.
And memory difficulties. Amber said she felt she had holes. Do you recall that?
I do. And her account was different than typical memory difficulties with trauma.
It is common for individuals who have experienced trauma.
And it's actually
to
not
have-
common. No, it's a symptom, but it's the least common.
In fact, a DSM-5 diagnosis for PTSD includes a, quote, inability to remember an important aspect of the traumatic event, end of quote. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And memory difficulties are a symptom of PTSD, correct?
Certain types of memory difficulties, yes.
Okay. Now, do you recall when Amber says the first incident of abuse took place?
I believe it was, the first incident in which yes. So she stated that it was early on in their relationship.
Okay. Do you recall it
I
involving?
don't recall the exact date off the top of my head.
Do you recall it being a tattoo, something related to a tattoo?
I do.
Okay. Now, if someone had been subjected to a 4-year relationship characterized by repeated IPV, they can have symptoms, correct?
Yes.
Intense anxiety,
Yes, certainly.
depressed or irritable states,
Actually, it's not so much states. When you're looking at a real trauma reaction, it's pretty persistent. It's less of these transient states.
intimate problems,
Yes.
relationship difficulties.
Yes.
And these are symptoms you're also attributing to the personality disorder, correct?
Yes, there are some key differences.
Okay. Now let's talk for a moment specifically about a couple of the profiles on the MMPI. This is not an exaggerated profile for her, is it?
No, actually, that was something unique. When she completed objective broadband measures, where the questions, you don't know what the questions are getting at, they seem completely random, she raised scores that indicated that she was trying to minimize any mental issues and appear completely free of pathology. When she took tests that asked questions that were specific to trauma, that's when you'd see these extreme exaggerations.
All right, let's go to page 337. My question on line 7, this is not an exaggerated profile, is it, for her? And your answer under oath at that time was, no, it is not an exaggerated profile. Do you see that?
Yes, we're
That's what
talking
you
about the
testified-
MMPI here.
You
Yes.
testified under oath at that time, correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Now, the profile is also not consistent with malingering, correct?
The MMPI-2 profile, it's specific to how she approached this test, and you're correct. For this test, it was a defensive profile, not an exaggerated profile.
So my question on line 10 was, this is not a profile consistent with malingering, correct? And your answer under oath at that time was correct. On this test, it is not consistent with malingering, period, right?
Yes.
That was your full answer. Okay. Now, is it your testimony under oath today that you have not been asked to testify concerning Ms. Heard's behavior in the context of her relationship with Mr. Depp, including any abuse?
That's correct.
Okay. And you have not made any determinations, including any of opinions that Ms. Heard abused Mr. Depp or Mr. Depp abused Ms. Heard, correct?
Correct, that's outside of the scope of psychology.
Okay. And you cannot testify whether Amber Heard suffered any emotional distress as a result of any of the defamatory comments that she has alleged Mr. Waldman made through Mr. Depp made through Mr. Waldman, correct?
What I can testify is that there was no indication of a decline in psychological functioning showing any injury since she's been with Mr. Depp.
You cannot testify one way or the other on that, correct? Your Honor, may we approach?
Okay.
Dr. Curry,
Yes.
in your report, nowhere in your report did you provide any opinion of whether Ms. Heard suffered emotional distress as a result of the defamatory statements. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, redirect.
Dr. Kerr, you were just asked a question about malingering
Yes.
and made reference to the MMPI-2. Is there another test that you did to make a determination with respect to malingering?
Yes, so I also, well, malingering is a term that most psychologists, we try to be careful of it because it indicates an intent for secondary gain. I prefer feigning, which you had brought up earlier, because it indicates that somebody is intentionally exaggerating, but I don't know necessarily why. So I think that's a more accurate term in general. On the MMPI-2, yes, there was no exaggerated profile. I also gave her the CAPS-5. I don't know if you'll remember, but that is the clinician-administered PTSD scale consistent with the DSM-5. And on that, there were signs of gross exaggeration. I also looked at the test results that were provided by Dr. Hughes, and on an objective test of trauma, there is a scale specific to intentional exaggeration on that test, and Ms. Heard was in the 98th percentile, meaning that she had engaged in extreme levels of exaggeration.
Thank you. You were asked about intimacy problems, relationship difficulties associated with IPV, and you then said there were some key differences.
Yes.
What are those?
So what you see when we're talking about the personality disorders is there is a very consistent pattern of the aggression, the violence, the irritability. First of all, it's escalated. But second of all, it occurs when there is either, for the borderline component, a threat of abandonment, a perceived slight, feeling like the person is about to leave you, about to walk away to get some space from an argument. It also occurs to a more mild extent, but when there's a loss of attention and a need to manipulate to try to get that attention back. But it's not, when somebody has PTSD, that irritability is sort of at a low, constant level, or it's completely random. For instance, you might have a Vietnam vet who went straight to bars for a period to get into fights with the hope that he would kill somebody and just self-destruct. So it's a very different type of presentation. IPV, it might be more irritability, but that's actually less of a symptom for female IPV victims. Usually what you'll see is somatic symptoms, the depression, a lot of fearfulness and anxiety, but typically more complaints about somatic symptoms.
Okay. You testified that some of the professionals involved in this case had to take their patient at her word. What did you mean by that?
So when you're providing therapy, you're in a very different role than an examiner. When you're the forensic examiner, you're just really looking at data to make a decision. When you're a therapist, you're an advocate for your client's well-being. And in fact, it's considered extremely unethical for a treating provider to ever provide opinion testimony like I'm providing, because it's so well known in our field that you're going to have an automatic bias for your client. It's almost a sense of protection, advocacy, wanting their best, which is why we also know that it's very inappropriate to convey any sort of opinion about whether a crime occurred, whether abuse occurred. We can certainly believe our clients, we can support them in their therapy and take them at their word, but when giving opinions and consultations, we have to be very, very cautious and really only provide the facts. We would state things in terms of, my client did report this, I saw this, here was our treatment plan, here was the diagnosis. It's, we're taught, we're trained to stay away from making any sort of opinions, understanding that most of the time, and most of Ms. Heard's providers were just treating Ms. Heard. They had never so much as done an initial interview with Mr. Depp and gotten his whole life story or his symptoms or his side of any of it. And they're going to be advocating, and the treatment relationship is about helping your client achieve well-being, not making formal psychological or psychiatric opinions.
So you're asked a question about a series of doctors. Dr. Cohen, treating physician?
Yes, he was a psychologist.
Yeah. Dr. Banks, treating physician?
Dr. Banks, yes, treating psychiatrist.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes, treating psychologist.
Every one of them had to take Amber Heard at his word, right?
Yes.
Oh, overruled on that.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. Is this witness subject? Yes, sorry. Is this witness subject to recall?
Yeah, for rebuttal.
All right. Since you're subject to recall, Dr. Curry, please do not discuss your testimony with anybody, and please do not watch anything of this trial, okay? All right,
Got
thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
You can stay there for a moment.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and take our afternoon recess for 15 minutes. Do not do any outside research and don't talk to anybody, okay? All right. Let's go ahead and take our recess till 3:20. Your next witness is by deposition, is that correct? We will get you all set up then. All right, thank you. Okay. We'll come back at 3:20 before the jury comes back out. We'll discuss your exhibits, okay? All right, thank you. Sure, well,
You approach? Sure.
are they agreed on, or? We're ready for the jury then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, thank you. Your next witness?
We call Officer Melissa Sines by deposition designation.
All right. Like
And
deposition.
just so the jury is aware, for the first hour or so, what you'll hear is questioning by Ms. Heard's counsel. It will then shift to questioning by Mr. Depp's counsel.
All right, thank you.
Please state your name and your business address.
Yes, Officer Melissa Sines, 1546 West Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, Los Angeles, California.
And what is your occupation?
I am a police officer.
Okay. And how long have you been a police officer?
Going on 12 years.
What year did you begin as a police officer?
2009.
And was that with the LAPD?
Yes, it was.
Did you have any law enforcement experience prior to coming to the LAPD in July of 2009?
No, I did not.
As of May 21, 2016, what was your rank?
Can you repeat the date?
May 21st, 2016.
I was a training officer.
And was that a P3?
Correct.
And as a training officer, were you considered a field training officer?
Correct.
And for how long a period of time had you been a training officer as of May 21, 2016?
Approximately, I believe, 4 months.
And who was the first officer you trained once you became a training officer at the LAPD?
I don't recall.
When did you start training Officer Haddon?
I don't recall the exact month.
Do you have an approximate?
If the incident was in May, then it's going to be within 2 months of May, before or after.
So are you suggesting that you may not have started training Officer Haddon until 2 months after the May 21, 2016 incident, so he wasn't there?
No, I'm not.
Was it 2 months or less from the time you started training Officer Haddon before the May 21, 2016 incident?
Yes, so I have a probationer for 2 months. So May could have been the second month I had him or the first month I had him.
But you don't recall, as you sit here today, how long you had been training Officer Haddon as of the May 21st, 2016 incident.
Correct.
What does Central Division include?
It encompassed downtown Los Angeles.
In May of 2016, what shift were you on?
I was working nights.
And what would the night shift entail? What was the time from when to when?
It is approximately 6:45 p.m. to 6:45 a.m.
And how many days a week would you work the shift?
Usually 3 days a week.
Typically, what was the range of the number of units that were working on your shift in May 2016 in Central Division?
I don't recall.
I mean, are we talking less than 5, more than 10, more than 25?
There would be at least 5 units. How high over that, I wouldn't know that. Every night is different. The city pulls from different divisions if there's special events going on, so it's constantly changing.
Okay. But it's usually at least 5 and maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 if there's not a special event. Would that be a fair estimate?
Correct.
What was the process for checking out equipment in May 2016 after roll call?
We would walk to the window and give them our name and serial number, and they would present us with equipment for the shift.
And what equipment were you given in May 2016 after roll call?
I don't recall.
You don't recall any of the equipment you checked out in May of 2016 after roll call?
I don't remember that specific day that I checked out equipment. I can tell you what I typically check out, if that's what you'd like.
All right, let's start there.
I usually check out a police vehicle, a taser, a less lethal beanbag shotgun, and a regular shotgun.
Anything else?
No, nothing else.
Do you check out body-worn video equipment?
Yes, if you were trained in body-worn video, then yes, you would check that out.
All right. Were you trained in body-worn video equipment?
I was not.
Have you ever been assigned body-worn video equipment?
Yes, I have.
When?
I don't remember the specific date.
What is your best estimate?
If I had to guess, it would probably be June of 2016.
Why do you think it was June of 2016 that you first were assigned body-worn video equipment?
Because that's the time frame that I remember having to use it. It was new to me. I never used body-worn before.
When did the LAPD start issuing body-worn equipment for Central Division?
I don't know that date.
When approximately?
I don't know. I couldn't give you a date.
Can you name any other officer that did not have body-worn equipment that was on your shift at any time between November 2015 and June 2016, other than you?
I cannot.
Have you had more than one body-worn video equipment?
Body-worn camera, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I have had 2. One in Central Division, and now a new one at Southwest Division where I currently am. The camera stays at their respective divisions.
While you were at Central Division, did you ever get assigned more than one body-worn video camera?
Not to my knowledge.
So to the best of your knowledge, you had the same body-worn video camera throughout the time that you were at Central Division, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you have a recollection of at any time while you were at Central Division, your body-worn video camera not working so you couldn't turn it on during an incident?
I do not recall that.
What tools were available to you in May of 2016 for investigating calls, answering and investigating calls?
Can you specify what you mean by tools?
Well, did you have a notebook, for example?
Yes, we carry field officers' notebooks.
Okay. And did you have your own field officer notebook?
Yes.
Can you describe what your field officer notebook looked like in May of 2016?
It's a small, just paper pad that we keep in our pockets to write on.
And do you carry a pencil or a pen with it so that you can take them out during a call and take notes?
I do.
What do you do with your notebooks once you have filled them?
You can turn them into the kit room and they can store them.
Is that what you have done?
I have my same officer's field officer's notebook in my locker.
Since you started?
No, I've had several different ones, but I usually keep them in my locker.
So for the field officer's notebook that you had in May of 2016, that would be in your locker?
It should be, yes.
How many field officer notebooks have you filled since you've been a police officer?
Not many, probably less than 5.
And do you recall roughly how many pages are in each field officer notebook?
No, I don't recall.
Did you have access to DART?
I don't recall what hours they worked at Central Division.
And what did DART stand for?
I don't know the specific acronym, but I know it's the domestic violence card.
Did you also have access to types of reports, incident reports, various forms, diagrams, things of that nature in case you needed them?
Yes, I did.
And where were those kept while you were on a shift? I'm talking about May 2016.
I usually keep extra spare reports in my bag, and I also keep them in my vest.
So when you answered calls in May of 2016, you had reports material in your vest as you answered calls? Is that correct?
Yes.
It's deposition exhibit number 14. It's a multiple page document. I'm just asking her if she recognizes this document.
Yes, I do.
Okay. When is the last time you reviewed this document?
About a week ago.
All right. And what were the circumstances under which you reviewed this document a week ago?
For this testimony.
Now, I asked you some questions about the body-worn video. Are you aware of any other officer being assigned your body-worn video under your serial number?
I'm not aware.
Is there any chance that you could be mistaken about when you were assigned body-worn video?
No, there's not.
And why do you say that?
Because everything is recorded and documented on evidence.com under my serial number. So if a supervisor wanted to enter the database under my serial number, they could watch my videos and see the specific date and time my videos started to record and when the date of my last video was to this date.
All right. And did you go back and look to see what date you started?
I did.
What was the date that you were assigned body-worn video equipment in Central Division?
So the first day that I took out body-worn video was June 16th of 2016.
I'm going to show you this second page of what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 1. It has you summoned to attend and give testimony at a deposition and also to produce certain documents. Do you recall this being issued?
Yes, I do.
And here we go. The documents to be produced. The first of those was all video footage recorded by you relating to any incident at 849 South Broadway, Los Angeles, California, 90014 on May 21, 2016, including all video footage relating to incident number, and it has the number on May 21, 2016. Did you conduct any type of search or any kind of effort to see if you had any video footage on May 21, 2016 relating to this incident?
The answer is no.
I'm going to ask you to did anyone at the LAPD at any point, supervisors, watch commanders, anyone connected with the LAPD, ever ask you whether you had any video footage from the incident of May 21, 2016?
No.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at number 2 here. It says all documents and or communications, including without limitation any notes, memoranda, reports, filings, and or summaries relating to any incident at 849 South Broadway, Los Angeles, California, 90014 on May 21, 2016. Are you aware of any documents or communications that would fit this description?
No.
Now, Officer Sines, you've had training on domestic violence, correct?
Correct.
Could you tell me what that consists of?
We received training in the police academy.
Anywhere else? Did you have any other type of domestic violence training other than when you were in the police academy?
Other than my experience in the field dealing with domestic violence, no, not that I can recall.
And as of May of 2016, would you agree that you had answered over 100 domestic violence calls?
About, I go to a lot of domestic violence calls every day.
Okay. And you consider yourself to be a specialist in domestic violence, is that accurate?
I don't understand the title specialist. I don't consider myself specialist.
In May of 2016, what was the police officer supposed to do when the victim of a domestic violence would not respond to questions or cooperate with pursuing charges after a call was placed and the police officers had arrived?
If an individual is uncooperative, we are to check the locations and make sure that the suspect is in hiding for the safety of the potential victim, and offer a business card if they decide to speak to us later.
In May of 2016, was it your understanding that if you saw evidence of injury or property damage in disarray, that you were to file a report even if the victim was not cooperating?
Correct.
I'm going to show you what is marked as exhibit number 8. And this is something that was dated November 24, 2018. It's to all department personnel from the Chief of Police, Domestic Violence Supplemental Report Form. And it starts out with the Domestic Violence Supplement Report Form, and it has the number of it, has been revised to provide a more concise picture of the history and needs of the victim for the purpose of investigating the crime of domestic violence. Was this a document that you recall receiving at some point?
Yes.
Okay. And do you understand, do you have any understanding of why this was supplemented in November 24, 2014?
I do not.
And I'm going to ask you, officer, to take a look at what has been marked as exhibit number 9, and it's called Los Angeles Police Department Domestic Violence Supplemental Report. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
Okay. And what is your understanding of what this document is?
It's a supplemental document that we add to a police report for domestic violence.
All right. And is this one of the reports that you would carry in your vest when you answered calls?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to take a look, if you can, at the very left-hand column, where it has a number of different categories here, and it has victim shaking, unresponsive, crying, scared, angry, fearful, of why these are included on this supplemental domestic violence report.
To identify somebody's emotional state during an investigation.
And this is specifically with respect to domestic violence, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then if you can turn over to the crime scene section on the right-hand side, you'll notice that there are some categories that include location vandalized / ransacked, personal property damage, furniture disarray, broken. What is your understanding of why those categories are included in there for making notations for domestic violence supplemental report?
To identify the crime scene at the time of the incident.
Okay. And was it your understanding that these items that they have on here may be significant in assisting in determining whether there was in fact domestic violence and improving the case?
Correct.
And I direct your attention specifically to the evidence section. And it indicates witnesses present during domestic violence, statements taken, evidence collected, photos taken on there. What is your understanding of the significance of this collecting this information?
It's significant to tell a story about what happened at the domestic violence incident.
Okay. And then if we can scroll down a little bit further to additional questions, there's a series of those, including, has suspect threatened to kill you? Do they possess firearms? Have they ever attempted to smother, strangle, or suffocate you? And things of that nature. What is your understanding of why you're supposed to ask those questions?
Give you a background on the relationship and an idea of what the victim and the suspect have been through.
Okay, thank you. Just let me ask you the question, Officer Sines. You did not fill out that supplemental report when you responded on May 21, 2016 to the Broadway call, correct, with Amber Heard?
Correct. It did not meet criteria.
The question I asked was, did you fill out one of those forms?
No, I did not. I did not meet criteria.
Officer Sines, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as exhibit number 10, and if I can direct your attention to the top, it says domestic violence standards of review, and it has field notebook divider, domestic violence laws, LAPD form number 18.30.02. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
It has case preparation. It says, note the complainant's emotional and physical condition. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And then ensure all evidence is gathered and preserved, e.g. blooded clothing, damaged phones, property. You see that?
Yes, I do.
And it also says ensure photographs are taken of injuries or lack of injury to complainant and accused, and then suggest both a day or two after. What is your understanding of the reasons for collecting this evidence?
Because these are fruits of a crime.
I'm sorry, I didn't...
Because these are fruits of a crime. If there's a crime, this is important to prove that a crime was committed.
And what do you mean by fruits of a crime?
If we're talking domestic violence, the location would be evidence. So if there's, a house is ransacked, then that should be noted in the report. That would be considered evidence.
All right, then we're going to go to the second page here, and it has ensure photographs are taken of scene and damaged property, e.g. broken furniture, holes in wall, damaged phones, phone call, evidence of alcohol consumption, general disarray. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And what is your understanding of why that would be important?
Same thing, proof of a crime.
Okay. And then it also says canvass location and interview all witnesses, including children, fresh complaint witnesses, neighbors, and local law enforcement. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And what would be the reason for canvassing the location and interviewing all witnesses?
That would be further evidence.
All right. And what is your understanding of what fresh complaint means?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay. And then if we go down a little bit further, it also has complainant questions, and it has questions such as length and nature of relationship, but also prior incidents of domestic violence reported and unreported, and what form of violence or abuse has taken. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And what is your understanding of why that would be important?
Because it gives us an idea and background of the relationship.
Okay. And then we go to the next page, and we have a little bit more here. We have the, not too far. And that says how long the abuse has been occurring, any logs or diaries, is there a pattern of alcohol or substance abuse? What is your understanding of why those would be relevant?
Again, because it gives us background on what we're dealing with, what type of relationship this is.
And may help with the proof of the crime?
Correct.
Okay. And then we have identify the person who first saw the complainant after the incident. And it says in parentheses, fresh complaint witness. So I'm kind of guessing that must be the definition. But why would it be important to interview or identify the person who first saw the complainant after the incident?
They probably have the best recollection.
Okay. And also has identify the person with whom the complainant first spoke about the incident, fresh complaint witness. What is your understanding of why that would be important?
Same thing, the best recollection.
Okay. And then we have what have neighbors seen or heard. Why would that be important?
Because it would prove to us that there was an incident if there was other people with the same story as the victim.
Okay. And then we also have, did witness observe how physical injury occurred? Why would that be important?
Because that would tell us that there was a crime, that somebody got injured.
Okay. And then we have statements by the complainant and or accused after the incident. Why would that be important?
Because we're getting our story from the complainant, so what they say is everything with the crime.
All right, let's look at 12 for a moment. This is exhibit number 12. It's Office of the Chief of Police, April 9, 2002. And it's a domestic violence victims memo. And it says, purpose, the department is legislatively mandated to provide specific information to victims of domestic violence crimes. And then they go in to describe that. What is your understanding of, well, let me go a little bit further because I'm going to try to move through this a little bit quicker. So it says, to mitigate this issue, the department has begun to use the Victim Information Notification Everyday, VINE, pamphlet to accomplish not only the domestic violence information requirements under Section 13701 of the California Penal Code, but also to provide information regarding the VINE program. Did you have a copy of that pamphlet? Was that something that was given to you?
Yes.
Okay. And was that something that you typically provided then, as it says you should, to victims of domestic violence?
Yes.
What is your understanding of why you were to provide the pamphlet to the victim? You understand the question?
Yes, because it gives resources to the victims, domestic violent resources, like shelters and phone numbers to provide help.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as exhibit number 11. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do. This is the vine.
Okay, when you say vine, is this the pamphlet that
Yeah.
was being referred to? Okay. And it's your understanding that you were supposed to be giving that pamphlet to victims of domestic violence on calls, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you provide a copy of this pamphlet to Amber Heard?
I did not identify her as a victim of domestic violence.
Is that the sole reason why you did not give that to Amber Heard?
Yes, we want to give them to victims of domestic violence.
I'm going to ask you to take a
At this point, Your Honor, Ms. Heard's counsel is asking to move into evidence and publish to the jury Defendant's Exhibit 730, and Mr. Depp has no objection.
All right, 7:30 in evidence and can be published.
Okay, and then
All
we
right.
can
Okay.
keep going.
first page of exhibit number 3. It's an incident recall from specifically May 21st, 2016. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
And please explain to me what it is.
It's a summary of our radio call.
All right, and how is this recorded?
By dispatch.
And how is it communicated to you?
A computer in our car.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at the very beginning of this. It starts out, it obviously has an incident number. Is this your understanding of the incident recall for the report to 849 South Broadway involving Amber Heard?
Yes.
It starts out with 5/21/16 at 20:30:58, which is 8:30:58 or almost 8:31, and it says incident initiated by such and such. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And the next thing that's communicated is Penthouse 3, PR received call from victim's friend Amber, assaulted by boyfriend. PR refused to give further. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Now, when you were out on the road, did you see that right away, or did you have to look this up later when it was you that was going to respond?
We review the calls as we're driving to the call.
Okay. Then we have at 5/21/2037, which is 8:37, a duplicate call. Do you see that?
I do.
All right, let's go down to 5/21/16. Officer Science, can you go where I just highlighted here? And it's 20:57, which would be what time?
8:57.
All right, and it has STAT:AS. What does that mean? So would that be when you, an officer, hadn't arrived at 849 South Broadway?
Correct.
And then it has, the next entry is 5/21/2016. It has 21:22:57. So that would be 9:22.
Correct.
Okay. And it says, go ahead. I'll have you read this. What does it say after that?
Met with Vic, Chuck loped, verified husband left loped, Vic advised verbal.
Okay, go ahead and go into the next page or next line. Go ahead.
Dispute and refuse to give any further info, issued business card.
Who wrote those two lines?
I don't recall.
And what did that mean to you, those two lines that you just read?
It's a disposition of what happened at the call.
Okay, can you tell me what that means? I mean, just tell me in real person's words what those words are.
Yeah, that we met with the victim. We checked the location. The husband wasn't there. And that the victim advised us that she just had an argument and that she wasn't going to give us any further information. And because we didn't identify a crime, we issued her a business card letting her know that she could reach out to us later if she changed her mind and wanted to cooperate.
Okay, and at what point did you close this incident?
Whatever it says on the screen, let's see, 9/22/57.
Okay, and what did incident closed mean?
That we cleared from the location. We were complete. Done.
Okay. Now, if we could go to page Bates stamp number 12. And do you recognize this document?
I do. It's a summary of all of our calls from that day.
All right, and I believe you testified earlier that you reviewed this document in preparation for this deposition. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. Correct.
Okay. And if we can go down to right here, that's 9/22, correct, at the end of that?
Correct.
All right. And it says 242D domestic violence. What is that?
It's a code for domestic violence.
And what does the 242D mean?
That's battery.
Officer Science, when we broke before the lunch break, I had just asked you about whether you had believed that you were at the penthouse on May 21st, 2016 for 30 to 60 minutes. Do you recall me asking that?
Yes, I do.
And do you recall testifying that that's what you thought was the time that you and Officer Haddon spent at the penthouse on May 21st, 2016?
Yes, I recall.
Okay. And in fact, it was significantly less, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in fact, it was, you entered from the elevator at 9:04 p.m. and went back into the elevator at 9:19 for a total of 15 total minutes, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And we've seen the video clips of you getting on the elevator and getting off, and that's where those timestamps come from. Now, once you got off the elevator at 9:04 p.m., the first thing you did was listen for some noise, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then you went around and checked out the outdoor courtyard to see if anyone was outside. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And you saw that there was a woman in the gym who was not related to the incident. Do you recall that?
Correct.
How did you know the woman was not related to the incident?
Because she seemed unfazed. She was just working out.
Did you speak with her?
No, I didn't.
Do you recall what she looked like?
I don't.
Now, did you take any notes during the entire 15 minutes from when you got off the elevator till when you got back on the elevator from the penthouse?
I did not.
Did Officer Haddon, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Did you take pictures or record anything?
I did not.
So after you saw the woman in the gym and looked at the perimeter, you went back to the hallway and you met with what you called a white male who was generic. Do you recall using that term?
They asked me to describe him, yes.
And you said generic, correct? And what do you mean by generic?
He didn't have any identifying, I don't know, nothing that I could remember. I just remember a male white, nothing out of the ordinary.
What color was his hair?
I don't even remember now.
Did he have facial hair, a beard, or a mustache?
I don't remember.
Do you recall how tall he was, roughly?
I don't remember anything about him.
Did you ask him his name?
I don't recall.
Okay. Now, the generic white male talked with you. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And when you first saw Amber Heard, she was crying, red-eyed, and was not making eye contact with you, correct?
Correct.
And you asked her a few questions, and it was quite clear that she did not want to speak to the police. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, Amber Heard was visibly upset, so she would look down. Sometimes she would look up at you when she spoke, but was back and forth, correct?
Correct.
What was Amber Heard wearing that night?
I don't recall.
What hairstyle did Amber Heard have that night?
I don't recall.
Now, when was the first time you were asked to provide details of the events of May 21, 2016?
I don't recall.
Do you recall providing your testimony at a deposition in July of 2016?
Correct.
Is that the first time you were asked to provide any details of what your recollection was of the events of May 21, 2016?
Correct.
Okay. And that was roughly 2 months later, is that correct?
Correct.
And how many shifts had you worked in that 2-month period?
I'm not aware. I don't know.
How many calls had you answered in those 2 months?
I don't know that number.
How many of those calls were domestic violence calls in those 2 months?
I don't know that number.
And if you saw any signs of injury on Amber Heard, or even just damage to property, would you have been duty bound to make a report?
Correct.
Now, your recollection is that there was no damage to the flat. You searched the entire flat and there was no damage, broken glass, or anything out of the ordinary. Would you agree?
Correct.
Did you see anything, did you observe anything out of the ordinary during this particular call that you answered at the penthouse on May 21, 2016?
I did not.
When you left that call, when you got back into that elevator, do you recall what you were thinking?
I remember being impressed by the penthouse, how big and beautiful it was, yes.
But anything else?
No, nothing.
And just so we can stay on that for a minute, you had not heard of Amber Heard at the time of this report, right, on May 21st, 2016?
Correct.
But you did know that Johnny Depp was an actor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you didn't know that that was Johnny Depp's penthouse when you reported there, correct?
Correct.
But you, as you just said, were impressed with the penthouse. Would it be fair to say you thought probably somebody with some wealth lived there?
Correct.
Can you bring up plaintiff's exhibit number 23? Officer Science, do you recognize this elevator at all?
Yes, I do.
What do you recall?
That's the elevator from the location.
Okay. Alex, I'm going to ask you to go to 211940. And as you're moving that, Officer Science, I'm going to ask you to take a look at this and see if you can tell me what you are saying to Officer Haddon in this video clip. That's you, is that correct?
Correct.
And Officer Haddon, do you recognize? Officer Science, can you tell what you were saying to Officer Haddon?
I cannot.
Does it look like you might have said at the beginning that was crazy?
I can't tell what I was saying.
Would you agree, though, that you were quite animated in your discussion with Officer Haddon?
No, I wouldn't agree.
How would you describe your demeanor?
comfortably talking to my partner.
All right, I'm going to ask you to take a look at plaintiff's exhibit number 17. And while Alex is bringing that up, so your best recollection is that you saw no injuries on Amber Heard, correct?
Correct.
And your best recollection is you saw no property damage, nothing in disarray, nothing out of the ordinary, correct?
Correct.
And if you had seen either of those, you would have had to file a report, correct?
Correct.
Officer Sines, let me ask you this question. So we've established that you got off the elevator on the penthouse level at 9:04 p.m. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Oh. Do you recognize the person here?
Yes, I do. Amber Heard.
Okay. And do you see any signs of injury on Amber Heard's face in this picture?
I do not.
Is it your testimony that you do not perceive this cheek to be reflecting an injury on Amber Heard?
Correct. No injury.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at this section here above the eyelid, and now I think with the, I'm going to ask you to take a look at that eyelid. Is it your perception that that eyelid does not reflect an injury? I'm sorry, what was your answer, Officer Sines?
Correct. No injury.
Okay, and then up above on the forehead level where the redness is and it looks like there's a couple of bumps, is it your perception that does not reflect an injury?
Correct.
Officer Sines, I'm going to ask you to look at what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 18, close to the time that you alighted from the elevator, correct?
Correct.
Please describe for me what you see in this photograph.
I see a striped carpet with discoloration on the right-hand side of the photo, and what I perceive as, I don't know if that's a reflection, some sort of mark.
Now, you believed and testified, in fact, that you considered the hallways to be very well lit that night, correct?
Correct.
Did you see this, these stains?
No, not that I recall.
Right. Would you agree that those are reddish stains on the right side?
Correct.
What does it look like from your experience?
Like a stain, like from a liquid.
Red wine, possibly?
It could be, yes.
Okay. But you don't recall seeing that in the hallway after you got off the elevator?
I do not.
And you did not investigate this or take any pictures or record anything about it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now let's go to number 19. Do you recognize what is depicted in exhibit number 19?
Yes, it's our business card.
And it has 1A1 on the front of it. What is that?
That's our unit designation.
Okay. And then it has Haddon and a badge number. Is that his badge number?
That is his serial number.
Okay, serial number, thank you. And it has your name, and is that your serial number?
Correct.
Who wrote this on the card?
I don't recall.
Would it have been either you or Officer Haddon?
Correct.
Do you recognize your handwriting?
I can't tell from this.
Now, I think you indicated when you were looking at the incident recall and the CAD summary that a business card had been left. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And why did you leave a business card?
I advised Amber Heard that she could contact us at any time if she changed her mind and decided that she wanted to speak to us and cooperate.
All right, let's go to number 20. Do you recognize this? What's depicted in this picture?
Yes, I do. It's the back of the business card.
All right, and it says 5/21/2016, and the time is 9:16 p.m. Is that the time that it was written?
Correct.
Okay. And do you recognize the handwriting on this side?
It looks like my handwriting.
Okay. Now it says radio call of dispute. Do you see that?
I do.
Why didn't you put verbal dispute?
It didn't. Verbal dispute, it's the same thing to me.
And you have refused report on here, correct?
Correct.
Could you just read this next part that you wrote on here?
Sure, advice can call at later time if changes mind, because she was uncooperative and didn't want to speak to us.
Okay. Now, why did you say if changes mind?
Because I was giving her the opportunity to have a resource if she changed her mind.
But if Amber Heard had no injuries and there was no evidence of any type of physical property issues, disarray, breakage, etc., then why would it matter if she changed her mind?
It's a courtesy that I choose to give people when I go to calls.
Now, if Amber Heard had called you later, you had already closed this out and had not written a report and had taken no notes, correct?
Correct.
But if I'm understanding your earlier testimony, that if you saw evidence of injury, or if you saw injury of evidence of property damage, even if the victim did not cooperate, you would write a report, correct?
Correct.
And we'll go to number 21. Officer Sines, this is just a picture. Do you recognize you and Officer Haddon here?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Officer Sines, is the timestamp on here of 9:19 p.m., 49 p.m., does that comport with your recollection of when you left?
I don't recall what time I left. I'm just going based on the video that is in front of me.
Okay, do you have any reason to believe that's incorrect?
I don't.
Officer Steins, I'm going to ask you to take a look at exhibit number 24. Okay. Do you recognize the person in this photo?
Yes, Amber Heard.
Okay. Do you perceive there to be an injury or evidence of injury on Amber's face in this photo?
No, I do not.
What is your perception of the redness on the cheek and the eyelid and above the eyebrow?
It's consistent with observed. Her crying, she's fair skinned, her face is flushed.
I'm going to ask you to look at what has been marked as exhibit number 25. Do you recognize this as Amber Heard?
Yes, I do.
Do you see a red mark on Amber Heard's cheek and above her eyelid and above her eyebrow on this picture?
Her face looks flushed, yes, redness.
Okay. And what is your perception of what that is caused by?
Like I said earlier, it's consistent with what I see in her crying.
Right. But you don't think it's consistent with a cell phone being thrown at her?
Correct. It does not look like an injury caused from a cell phone.
Okay. And why not?
Because it's consistent with somebody crying. Her face is flushed.
This was taken on May 21st. I'm going to ask you to look at what has been marked as exhibit number 26. Do you recognize this as Amber Heard?
Yes, I do.
Officer Steins, do you see any redness on Amber Heard's cheek and above her eyelid, and we'll go with those?
I do.
And what is your perception of what the cause of those is, those red marks?
It's consistent with her crying. Her face is flushed.
And is it fair to say that you do not believe that this reflects an injury?
Correct.
And would it also be fair to say that you would not consider it sufficient to investigate further, whether it's an injury?
There is nothing that would stop me from investigating. I would continue to ask her questions, and it's up to the victim if they want to cooperate.
But just so that we're clear here, even if the victim doesn't cooperate, if you see signs of injury, you still and I believe you testified to this, believe yourself duty-bound to write a report, correct?
Yes.
But in your mind, you don't perceive this as to be reflective of an injury, is that correct?
Correct.
And I'm going to ask you to take a look at exhibit number 27. Again, do you recognize this as Amber Heard?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And do you see redness on the cheek of Amber Heard on this one?
Yes, I do.
All right. And then you had testified on a number of these other pictures and on this one as well that this is consistent with crying. Do you see any redness on Amber's other cheek?
Yes, I do.
Is it the same or similar to the redness on the cheek, on the right cheek?
Based on this photo, it looks like one cheek is redder than the other.
But you also don't see any swelling with that?
Correct.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as exhibit number 28. Do you recognize this as Amber Heard?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And do you see redness on the right cheek and above the eye?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And is it your perception that this reflects any type of, or could reflect any type of injury?
No,
Why not?
because my perception is it was consistent with her crying.
All right, let's take this down, go to 29. I'm going to ask you the same questions. Do you recognize this as Amber Heard?
Yes.
And do you see any redness in the right cheek and above the eyelid?
Yes.
Okay. And is it your perception that these are not indicative of injury?
Yes.
And what is your reasoning?
It's consistent with her crying.
Let's take this one down. Let's go to number 30. Now, you testified earlier that you thoroughly searched the penthouse. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And Josh Drew, the gentleman that you called the generic male, actually took you through, escorted you through the penthouse and the series of penthouses, correct?
Correct.
Officer Science, did you or did you not thoroughly search the penthouses on May 21st, 2016?
We did search the penthouse.
Okay. And you used the term thoroughly, did you not?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you feel like you conducted a thorough search of the penthouses that night?
Yes, I did. I did a sweep of the location for the suspect.
Okay. And when you're talking about a sweep of the location, did you go through every room?
Yes, every room.
Okay. And was there anyone escorting you through those rooms?
Yes, the same male that we were met with at the beginning of the call.
That you called the generic male, correct?
Correct.
Now, you also testified a little earlier that this was a very nice series of penthouses, right?
Yes.
Did you interview the woman that was sitting with Amber Heard?
I attempted to. All parties were uncooperative.
What did you say to the woman that was with Miss Heard?
I don't recall the exact words, but I introduced myself to everyone and asked if they seen what happened or know what happened, and they all refused to speak to me.
Did you ask for their names?
I recall, yes, I did ask for their names. Nobody would give me their names.
Now, that's a little unusual, isn't it?
No, it's not. A lot of people don't like us.
Well, is it that they don't like you, or is it potentially that they don't want to, with a domestic violence situation, are reluctant to press charges?
Every situation's different. Based on my training experience where I work, it's usually that people do not like us.
Do you have a recollection of what the woman who was with Amber Heard looks like?
No recollection.
Do you know what color hair she had?
I have zero recollection.
So you don't recall how old she was, how tall she was, what her hairstyle was, what she was wearing, anything about her.
Zero recollection.
But somehow you're sure you tried to interview her and she refused to answer questions.
Yes, it's common practice. I try to interview everyone during my investigation.
So did you pull out your notebook at any time while you were in the penthouse?
I did not. I had nothing to write. No one would speak to me.
Well, how did you know that when you started asking the questions that they weren't going to give an answer?
Because they just looked at me.
But wouldn't you pull out your notebook first and then ask the questions? Then write down the answers as they're giving them to you?
No, I don't put anything in my hands for officer safety issues until I'm sure that I have something to write.
I'm sorry, officer. Can you repeat your answer?
I don't put anything in my hands for officer safety reasons. If I'm not sure I'm going to write, I keep my hands free. When I ask the questions, I got no answers. Therefore, I didn't take out any notebooks or pens.
Did you have any reason to fear for your safety at the time that you were talking with Amber Heard and the woman with her?
I always fear for my safety. A potential suspect could have been in the house. So yes, my guard was not down, if that's what you're asking.
What did you do first? Did you look at throughout the house to ensure that the person wasn't there, or did you ask the questions first and then look at the house?
I can't just go into a house and start checking it without asking questions.
So what questions did you ask first?
I don't recall specific questions.
Do you recall any of your questions?
I don't.
Do you recall any of the answers that you were given?
I don't recall.
Now, we went through the domestic violence supplemental report and some of the guidelines for officers on domestic violence. Do you recall that the crime scene, a number of the items reflected location ransacked, location vandalized, furniture in disarray, personal property damage? Do you remember those being items as the checklist for crime scene for domestic violence?
As they pertain to domestic violence reports, yes, I do.
Right. Now, did you ever speak with the two officers who answered the second call to the townhouse that night?
I did not.
Did you ever communicate in any manner with the two officers who answered the second call to the penthouse?
I did not.
Did you communicate through a third party to the second set of officers relating to the domestic violence call and your determination?
I did not.
Did you know the two officers who responded to the second call?
Did not.
Sorry. Do you know who they are to this day?
I do not.
Have you ever spoken to the other two officers about the responding to this call on May 21st, 2016?
I have not.
Have you ever spoken with anyone else about your response and their response to this call on May 21st, 2016?
I have not.
And just so everybody's aware, up until now, you've been listening to questioning from Ms. Heard's counsel. At this point, I believe we're going to shift over to questioning from Mr. Depp's counsel.
I want you to focus on the date of the incident that we have been talking about during this deposition, and that is May 21st, 2016. I'll refer to that as the date of the incident. Do you understand what I mean when I say date of the incident?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So as of the date of the incident, for how long had you been a training officer?
Since, I believe, the end of November of 2015.
So between 6 to 8 months?
Yes.
Prior to the date of the incident, for how long had you been a training officer?
4 to 6 months.
Okay. And as of the date of the incident, approximately how many incidents of domestic violence had you come across?
I couldn't tell you. I believe you said hundreds.
Yes, that's how I understood it from testimony I read in previous depositions of yours. So it's in the hundreds?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you and you indicated that you proceeded to the incident at the Eastern Columbia building due to what you heard from dispatch. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do you recall, as you sit here today, what you were told from dispatch that led you to the Eastern Columbia building on the date of the incident?
I don't have an independent recollection.
Okay. As you sit here today, do you recall that it had something to do with a dispute at that location?
Correct.
And when you first arrived at the scene of the incident, what did you first do on entering the building?
We met with a security guard in the lobby who escorted us to the elevator.
Did you ask that security guard any questions about the building? Sorry, did you ask that security guard any questions?
Not that I recall.
Did the security guard escort you up to the penthouse?
They gave us access through the elevator. I do not believe that they came up to the penthouse with us. I believe they just accessed the elevator.
Okay. And when you arrived at the penthouse and exited the elevator, was it just you and your partner, Mr. Haddon, Officer Haddon?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you do next?
We tried to listen for any kind of sounds of domestic violence. We checked the hallways. We didn't observe anyone. We went out to a courtyard, didn't observe anyone. And based on what I was just reminded of, there was a woman in the gym who didn't seem involved, was working out, looked fine, nothing out of the ordinary. And then we responded to a door in the hallway, and I knocked and was met by a male.
Okay. Up until that point in time, from exiting the elevator to knocking on that door, did you see anything that indicated a crime?
I did not.
Up until the point where you knocked on that door, did you see or hear or witness anything indicating that there had been a domestic violence perpetrated?
I did not.
Up until you knocked on that door, did you see anything which you would have considered out of the ordinary?
I did not.
And I guess what I'm asking is, walking from the elevator to the gym and then to the door that you knocked on, were you in the hallway?
Yes, I was in the hallway.
Okay. And during that time period, from exiting the elevator through to knocking on the door, was there anything in the hallway that was unusual to you?
Not that I observed, no.
Did you see any stains on the floor?
Not that I recall.
Did you see any vandalism in that area?
No, I did not.
Did you see any broken glass in that area?
I did not.
Okay. And upon knocking on the door, what happened next?
A male opened the door. I don't remember the exact questions and conversation we had, but I remember asking if they called for help, and he said that it was the neighbor and that she was inside of his house apartment with his girlfriend. And I asked him if they could step out, and he told me to wait, and he shut the door. And we waited for them to exit. I don't remember how much time passed by, and they came out, and that's when we were met with his girlfriend and who I know now as Miss Heard in the hallway.
And up until that point in time, did you hear anything that led you to believe that a crime had been committed?
I did not.
Up until that point in time, did you see anything that made you believe that a crime had been committed?
I did not.
Up until that point in time, did you hear anything that made you believe that there had been an act of domestic violence there?
I did not.
Up until that point in time, did you see anything that made you believe that there had been an act of domestic violence there?
I did not.
Okay. So you indicated that after you knocked on the door, you spoke with a gentleman. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you previously testified to someone as a generic white male. Is that the same person?
Yes.
So your previous testimony, and when you were referring to a generic white male, that's the person who opened the door when you first knocked on it, correct?
Yes, there was only one male at the location besides my partner.
And there was only one male. Is that for the entire time you're at the location?
Yes.
So in the hall, you met with the generic white male, Miss Heard, and the generic white male's girlfriend. Is that right?
Definitely.
And it was just those three folks?
Correct.
And you were there with your partner, Officer Haddon?
Correct.
Okay. And how, in the hallway, how far were you standing from Miss Heard?
It was close, probably like 2 to 5 feet.
Okay. And at that time, did you notice any injuries on Miss Heard?
I did not.
Okay. Were you looking to see if she had any injuries at that time?
Yes, I was.
And so you were looking to see if Miss Heard had any injuries, and you determined that she did not. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And was the lighting good enough in the hallway for you to make that determination?
Yes, the hallways was well lit.
Okay. And at the time, were you wearing any sort of corrective lenses?
I was not.
Although you were not wearing corrective lenses, were you prescribed corrective lenses at the time?
No, I have never worn glasses, and I'm not prescribed. I have good vision.
Okay. And at that time, did you have good vision?
Yes, I did.
At the time you were observing Miss Heard, did you have good vision?
Yes, I did.
And did you observe any injuries at that time?
I did not.
What did you ask Miss Heard at that time, if anything?
I don't have an independent recollection. Again, it's been so long. I don't remember specific questions.
Okay. Now, let me just back up a little bit. During the time period from when you left the elevator and when Miss Heard came onto the hallway, at any time did the generic white male tell you that there had been an act of domestic violence?
No, he did not.
Did he tell you anything that made you think there may have been an act of domestic violence?
No, he did not.
Did he tell you anything that made you believe that a crime may have been committed?
No, he did not.
And during that time period, did you ask him what had happened or what was happening?
Yes, I did ask him, and he just refused to give me any information.
Okay. Okay. So now, fast forward to what we were talking about with respect to you in the hallway with the generic white male, Ms. Heard, and the generic white male's girlfriend. After you observed her and saw no sign of injury, what did you do next?
I advised her that we would be conducting a protective sweep just to make sure that there was no one else in the house. And she agreed if her neighbor, the male, could accompany us with the protective sweep.
Okay. Up until that point in time, did you ask Ms. Heard what happened?
Yes, I did.
And what was her response?
No response. She was uncooperative.
And Officer Stein, at that time, was Ms. Heard cooperative?
Ms. Heard was uncooperative.
Thank you. And by uncooperative, does that mean that when you asked her a question, she wouldn't say a word? Did she say something that made you think she was not cooperating?
She wouldn't say anything.
Okay. But just to be clear, you would ask questions and she wouldn't say anything?
Correct.
Okay. And what did you do at that point?
After the protective sweep, I asked her again if she wanted to talk to me, if anything happened. Again, I don't remember the specific questions that I asked her, but I asked her questions to establish if there was some sort of crime, who was involved, and again, she wouldn't give me any information. I attempted to ask her friend, the other woman in the room. I even asked the males to wait in the hallway so it could just be us women in there so we could talk privately. Maybe she felt more comfortable that way. Still, they denied that there was any crime. They wouldn't answer any specific questions. So I wrote a business card. I advised her if she changed her mind that she could call us at any time and we would respond to help her out.
So backing up a bit to the time you were in the hallway with the three of them, and you testified that Ms. Heard was uncooperative, and then you indicated you did a sweep. I want to start with from the point of time in the hallway where she was uncooperative, transitioning to the sweep. How did that occur? Did you ask her if you could look in the penthouses? How did you go from standing in the hallway to conducting a sweep?
I don't recall.
Now, before you swept the penthouses, did you ask if you could enter the penthouses?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what was the response?
I can't remember if she gave me a response or nodded her head. I can't remember.
From what you observed or heard from Ms. Heard, you took it that she was permitting you to enter the penthouses and look around. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. Was it more than one penthouse?
There was two.
Okay. And this term sweep we've been using, is that a technical police officer term?
Yeah.
What do you mean by conducting a sweep?
It's called a protective sweep, and we do so to make sure that there's no other individuals that may be victims that are hurt inside of the location or suspects hiding, concealing themselves from officers that would attack the victim after we left the location. So we go in to verify that any potential suspects are gone from the location for the victim's safety.
Thank you. And you conducted a protective sweep of two penthouses, correct?
Correct.
What was your understanding of who owned or lived in the first penthouse that you performed a protective sweep on?
It was my understanding that Amber Heard, that it was her home. Again, the gentleman directed us. That's why he came with us, so we wouldn't get lost.
I see. And during your protective sweep, during the first penthouse, did anybody accompany you during the entire sweep?
Yes, the only male that was there besides my partner.
Okay. And your partner conducted the sweep with you?
Correct.
Okay. And as to the protective sweep of the first penthouse, did you go into every room of the penthouse?
To my knowledge, yes.
And was your knowledge based on the generic white male leading you around?
Correct.
Was it your understanding that your protective sweep included you looking in every room in the penthouse?
Correct.
During the protective sweep of the first penthouse, did you see anything that led you to believe that a crime had been committed?
I did not.
During the protective sweep of the first penthouse, did you hear anything that made you think a crime had been committed?
I did not.
During the first protective sweep, did you see anything that made you think that an act of domestic violence had occurred?
I did not.
During the protective sweep of the first penthouse, did you hear or see anything? Did you hear or see anything that made you believe an act of domestic violence had occurred?
I did not.
Okay. Upon your completion of the protective sweep of the first penthouse, up until that point in time, from you exiting the elevator up until that point in time, did you hear or see anything that made you believe that a crime had been committed?
I did not.
Up until that point in time, did you hear or see anything that made you think an act of domestic violence had occurred?
I did not.
Now, I want to ask you, you testified to you viewing Ms. Heard and not seeing any signs of injury. Did you view her again after that first viewing?
During the interviews and throughout the entire investigation, I'm constantly scanning her and watching. So if I see any other observations that would indicate any injury or domestic violence.
And did you see anything like that?
I did not.
And you didn't see, did you see anything like that during the entire time period that you were on that call? And do you believe that you had enough time viewing Ms. Heard to determine whether or not she had sustained any injuries?
Yes, I do.
And did you determine that she sustained any injuries?
I determined that she did not sustain any injuries.
So other than the conversation you had with her in the hallway when you first got there, did you have any other conversations with Ms. Heard?
I did. Inside of the loft or penthouse, sorry.
Okay. Was that before or after the protective sweep?
I believe both, before and after. I attempted.
Okay. How many separate conversations did you have with Ms. Heard?
I don't recall.
Okay. There was at least the one in the hallway, and there was one before or after the protective sweep, correct? I'm sorry, I missed that answer.
Correct.
Okay. And during the second conversation you had with her after the one in the hallway, how close were you to her?
The same, 2 to 5 feet. She was right in front of me.
Were you close enough to get a good view to determine whether or not she had any injuries?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And during that second conversation, did you determine whether or not she had any injuries?
I determined that she did not have any injuries.
Okay. At any point in time during the incident, during the date of the incident, did she complain of any injuries?
She did not.
During the protective sweep of the penthouse, Did you see anything in disarray?
I did not.
Okay. Now, you indicated, let me ask you, did you do a protective sweep of the second penthouse?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did the generic white male accompany you on that sweep as well?
Yes, he did.
What was your understanding of who owned or resided in that second penthouse?
I had no idea.
Okay. Did you, during that second protective sweep, did you walk through every room in that penthouse?
From my understanding, yes, we did.
Okay. And during that second protective sweep, did you see anything that you would say was in disarray?
I did not.
During that second protective sweep, did you see anything that made you believe there had been a crime committed?
I did not.
During that second protective sweep, did you hear anything that made you think a crime had been committed?
I did not.
During your protective sweep of the second penthouse, did you see anything that made you believe an act of domestic violence had occurred?
I did not.
During the protective sweep of the second penthouse, did you hear or see anything that made you believe a crime had been committed?
I did not.
After you performed the protective sweep of the second penthouse, what did you do?
I responded to where Amber Heard was, and I again tried to see if I could get any information from her. I was unsuccessful, and then I issued her the business card and let her know that she could call us back if she wanted to talk.
Did she answer any of your questions?
No, she did not.
At any point in time during the entirety of the incident, did Ms. Heard answer any of your questions?
No, she did not.
During the entire time of the incident, did Ms. Heard complain of any injuries?
No, she did not.
During the entirety of your time at the incident, did anybody say anything that made you believe a crime had been committed?
No, they did not.
During the entirety of the time you were at the incident, did anybody say anything that made you believe an act of domestic violence had occurred?
No, they did not.
Okay. During the entirety of your time at the incident, did you see anything that made you believe a crime had occurred?
I did not.
During the entirety of your time at the incident, did you hear anything that made you believe a crime had been committed?
I did not.
During the entirety of your time at the incident, did you hear or see anything that made you believe an act of domestic violence had occurred?
I did not.
Had you heard of anybody by the name of Miss Heard at that time?
Never.
Amber Heard?
No, I have never heard of Amber Heard before that time.
Okay. Did you recognize any of the people that you encountered during the incident?
I did not.
At the time of the incident, did you have any reason to believe that anybody you encountered at the incident was famous?
I did not.
Okay. And during the entire time that you were at the penthouses during the incident, did you have any reason to believe that Mr. Depp was affiliated or involved in the incident?
I did not.
Madam Reporter, can you repeat my last question? I lost where I was.
Question, during the entire time you were at the penthouses during the incident, did you witness any bruises on Miss Heard? And there was not a response.
I did not observe any injuries on Miss Heard.
Okay. Did you observe any swelling on Miss Heard's face?
I did not.
Did you observe anything that led you to believe that she was a victim of domestic violence?
I did not.
Alex, if you can pull up Exhibit 2.
So is this going to be Exhibit 57?
Yes. Officer Sines, do you recall having your deposition taken on July 18, 2016 in connection with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall giving testimony in connection with that deposition under oath? Is it yes? I'm sorry, officer.
Yes.
Okay. And did you give accurate and true testimony at that time?
Yes.
Okay. And you understood you were under oath, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Alex, if you can go to page 26. Officer Sines, do you recall testifying as to, that, and I'm talking about today, do you recall just testifying that you can recall what Ms. Heard said to you, if anything?
I do not have an independent recollection, but I can go off what I'm seeing here on my screen.
Okay.
Your Honor, we're at 5 o'clock. It looks like we have about 18 minutes left. Do you want to?
You don't have any problem finishing it tonight, do you? Let's go ahead and finish it. Okay. Thank you.
And do you agree with me that your memory of the day of the incident was fresher on July 18, 2016 than it is today?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And the incident was May 21st, 2016. This deposition was taken July 18th, 2016. How long after the incident was this deposition taken?
A few months.
Okay. And Alex, if I could have control. A little delayed, Alex. Can that be fixed, or is that just the way it is?
This is Alex speaking. Yeah, I'm afraid I can't help that. I'm sorry, Mr. Preciado.
That's fine. Officer Sines, I'm going to start here. Do you see my cursor?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I'm going to start here at line 3. The question is, okay, so we'll get back to that. Before you did a sweep or a check of the rest of the penthouse, did you have an opportunity to speak with Ms. Heard when you were in the apartment? Answer, yes, I did. Okay. Question, okay, can you tell us about that conversation? Answer, sure. I asked her what happened. Opening question. She said nothing, and she continued to cry. I said, who do you live with? Who do you live here with? She shook her head as if she did not want to answer. I asked her, "Are you hurt? Do you need an ambulance?" And she shook her head again, no. At that point, I asked her if she would mind if I checked her apartment. And that's when she said no. Officer, does this refresh your recollection of the conversation you had with Ms. Heard at that time?
Yes, it does.
And your testimony that I just read, is that true and accurate?
Yes, it is.
During the entire time period you were at the penthouses on May 21st, 2016, did Ms. Heard say that she had been assaulted in any way by anybody?
No, she did not.
During your protective sweep of the two penthouses, did you view anything that you would characterize as vandalism?
I did not.
During the entire time you were at the penthouses on May 21st, 2016, were you looking for any probable cause to believe that a crime had been committed?
Yes, I was.
And what did you determine?
I determined there was no crime.
What did you determine with respect to an assessment of probable cause?
There was no probable cause of any sort of crime.
Thank you. During the entire time you were at the penthouses on May 21st, 2016, were you wearing any body-worn video cameras?
I was not.
Are you certain of that?
I am certain.
And how is it that you are certain of that?
Because I didn't start using body-worn video until June of 2016.
And that's after the date of the incident, correct?
Correct.
Alex, if you would mind putting Exhibit 9 back up. Officer Sines, you were shown this document earlier. What is this document?
It is a domestic violence supplemental report.
And do you recall counsel asked you about the victim column and the crime scene column?
Yes, I do recall.
Do you also see that there's a suspect column in the middle?
Yes.
Okay. And is there any difference between the victim column and the suspect column with respect to the box terms?
No difference.
Okay. Did you fill out one of these forms in connection with your investigation on May 21st, 2016?
I did not,
Why not?
because it was determined there was no crime.
And Officer Sines, just one more question with respect to that Exhibit 9. I know it's not up, but the fact that you did not fill out that form, is that consistent with your training?
Yes, it is. I wouldn't fill that out because there was no crime. It's not called for.
When you testified during the London trial, at the time, did you believe your testimony was accurate?
Yes, I do.
At all times you've testified under oath in any legal proceedings, trials, depositions. Do you always give accurate and truthful testimony?
Yes, I do.
And do you have any reason to not give accurate and truthful testimony in connection with this deposition?
I do not.
Officer Sines, do you see these two pictures?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize the person in the pictures?
Yes, Amber Heard?
In both pictures?
Yes.
Okay, do you see a difference in these two pictures, between these two pictures?
Yes, I do the lighting of the photos.
Okay. Do you see any difference in connection with the redness on the cheeks of Ms. Heard as between these two pictures?
Yes, I do. The left side is, the photo's brighter.
Okay. And other than that, would you agree with me that these two pictures are the same? In other words, Ms. Heard's face, the position of her face, everything about her in these pictures is identical except for the differences that you've indicated?
Yes.
Okay. And even though these are the same pictures, do you see any difference with respect to the redness on Ms. Heard's face with respect to the two pictures?
Yes, the photo on the left is brighter, causing the redness on the cheeks to what appears to be brighter or exaggerated.
What does it say with respect to, let's concentrate on the picture on the left. Can you read for me what it says in the little box at the very top on the left under add a title? Do you see a date and a timestamp?
Yes, I see it.
What's it say? Date and timestamp?
Date is May 21st, 2016. Timestamp is 9:25:12 p.m.
And now let's look at the other picture, Exhibit 29, at the same spot. Can you read for me what the timestamp says there?
Yes, it says May 21st, 2016, 9:25:12 p.m.
So both exhibits, both pictures have the same exact timestamp, correct?
Correct.
And even though that's the case, do you still believe that there's a difference between the two pictures as you previously described?
Yes, I do.
Signs, do you see Exhibit 41?
Yes.
Do you recall counsel asking you questions
Yes.
during your protective sweep of the two penthouses on May 21st, 2016? Did you see anything in disarray?
No.
Officer Sines, I think you answered this, but up until the present, for how long have you been a LA, Los Angeles police officer?
I will be going on 12 years.
Officer Sines, in connection with your investigation at the Eastern Columbia building on May 21st, 2016, were you in a rush in any way to complete the investigation?
No.
Were you willing to stay as long as necessary to determine if a crime had been committed?
Yes.
At any point in time during your investigation on May 21st, 2016 at the penthouses, did Ms. Heard ask you to file a report?
No.
Did anybody that you spoke with or saw on May 21st, 2016 at the penthouses ask you to file a report?
No.
Did you have any cause to file a report?
No.
And was that determination in line with your training?
Yes.
If you had witnessed anything that led you to believe that an act of domestic violence had occurred, would you have filed a report?
Yes.
And you, in fact, did not file a report, correct?
Yes. Correct.
And if you had witnessed something that led you to believe that an act of domestic violence had occurred, would you have filed a report even if Ms. Heard had asked you not to?
Yes.
And is that in line with your training?
Yes.
Officer Sines, you were asked some questions.
And just so everybody's on the same page, we have about a minute and a half of questions from Ms. Heard's counsel at this point.
When you were got off the elevator in the penthouse and when you got on, and how much time you spent at the penthouse level, I approached it in my earlier, but based on the cross-examination, I feel like we need to go back to that. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at what is exhibit number 6. And you recognize you and Officer Haddon in this picture?
Yes.
Okay. And what time does the timestamp on this picture say for the elevator?
It says 21:04:43.
Okay, that's 9:04:43. Would that be right, PM?
Yes.
And you looked at this earlier. I'm going to ask you to take a look at it again at 21. And so this one has what time?
21:19:49.
All right, and allowing for, and Officer Sines, you said earlier that you weren't sure whether there were accuracies or inaccuracies in terms of the elevators, but allowing for that there may be any issues at all, would you agree that it still means that you were on and off that elevator in 15 minutes?
Assuming the times are correct, yes.
Okay. You were asked to look at a number of the pictures that I had shown you earlier that were taken on the night of May 21st, 2016, both before, during, and after the time that you and Officer Haddon had reported to the to Ms. Heard's penthouse. Do you recall seeing those again and being asked about them?
Yes.
You were asked by counsel for Mr. Depp to take a look at those again, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And he asked you if you had seen any of those photographs before, and you indicated that you had not, correct?
Correct.
So, other than what was placed in the CAD summary by either you or Officer Haddon, and then also went into the incident recall, are you aware of any documentation that either you or Officer Haddon collected relating in any manner to your visit to the penthouse on May 21, 2016?
No.
All right, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the testimony for today. Please do not do any outside research and don't talk to anybody about the case, and we'll see you tomorrow morning, okay? Thank you. All right, I still have some outstanding exhibits, so if you could get with Jamie and see which ones those are, so we can get that taken care of, so we don't get backwards and we keep up, all right? All right, we'll see you in the morning. All right, thank you.